The most dangerous lies aren't the ones told to us by charismatic strangers or politicians on a screen. They are the ones we meticulously craft for ourselves using the very tools of logic and reason we spent decades perfecting. Imagine a man who spent 30 years as a high-level structural engineer, a man trained to spot a hairline fracture in a steel beam from 50 paces, someone who lived his life by the cold, hard laws of physics and mathematics. We'll call him Arthur. Arthur wasn't someone you could trick with a cheap card game or a suspicious email. Yet he ended up standing in a cold, desolate field in the middle of a November night, waiting for a signal that he believed would change the course of human history. He had lost his savings, his professional reputation, and the respect of his grown children, not because he was unintelligent, but precisely because he was too smart to see the trap he had built for himself. Before we explore how a mind like Arthur's could betray its own owner, let us know in the comments where you're watching from, as we'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Arthur's journey into the unthinkable didn't begin with a sudden breakdown or a lack of mental clarity, but rather with a series of small, logical steps that felt entirely rational at the time. He lived in a quiet suburb of Connecticut, a man who valued order and the pursuit of objective truth above all else. After he retired, the silence of his large, empty house began to feel less like peace and more like a void that needed to be filled with information. He started spending his evenings reading about ancient civilizations and the strange architectural anomalies that mainstream history couldn't quite explain. To a man who understood load-bearing walls and tension points, the official narrative felt incomplete. Arthur began to find patterns in the alignment of stone structures across the globe, patterns that required advanced geometry to decode. He wasn't looking for magic. He was looking for the hidden blueprint of the world. Because he was an expert in his field, he felt uniquely qualified to challenge the status quo. This is where the first layer of the trap was laid. When we are experts in one area, we often fall into the illusion that our competence is universal. Arthur believed that if he could solve a complex engineering problem, he could solve the mystery of human origin just as easily. He started joining online forums where other highly educated professionals shared their findings. There were architects from London, mathematicians from Toronto, and doctors from Chicago, all convinced that they had discovered something the rest of the world was too blind or too uneducated to see. The group didn't feel like a cult. It felt like a prestigious research committee. They used technical language, cited obscure but real peer-reviewed papers, and built elaborate models to support their theories. Arthur found himself invigorated. For the first time in years, he felt like he was part of an elite team working on the most important project of his life. He began to isolate himself from his old friends, who he now viewed as intellectually lazy. He couldn't understand how they could be satisfied with the mundane reality of their lives when such monumental secrets were waiting to be uncovered. He was using his massive intellect to build a wall of evidence that was so thick and so complex that no amount of outside logic could pierce it. He had created a closed loop where every piece of counter-evidence was just further proof of a cover-up. As the months passed, the theories became more extreme, shifting from historical anomalies to a belief that a specific cosmic event was approaching, one that only those with the correct mathematical understanding could survive or benefit from. Arthur sold his shares in the engineering firm he helped build to fund a research station in a remote part of the countryside. He convinced himself that he wasn't being reckless, but rather that he was making a calculated investment in the future. His children tried to intervene, but their emotional pleas only reinforced his belief that they weren't ready for the truth. He saw their concern as a sign of their limited perspective. To Arthur, he was the only one acting logically in a world full of people who were sleepwalking through their existence. The night in the field was the culmination of 2 years of intense study and sacrifice. Arthur stood there with his equipment, his eyes fixed on the sky, waiting for a celestial alignment that his calculations guaranteed would happen. But the stars remained indifferent. The hours ticked by, the temperature dropped, and the silence of the woods became deafening. There was no signal, no shift in the atmosphere, and no revelation. For any other person, this would be the moment the illusion shattered. But for a man as smart as Arthur, the mind has a final, desperate defense mechanism. Instead of admitting he was wrong, he began to look for the error in his data. He convinced himself that he hadn't been fooled by a lie, but that he had simply missed one tiny variable in a sea of equations. This story isn't unique to Arthur. It is a pattern that repeats throughout history among the brightest minds. The more intelligent a person is, the better they are at rationalizing their biases and creating sophisticated reasons to believe things that are demonstrably false. This is the intelligence trap. It is the phenomenon where our cognitive abilities don't serve as a filter for truth. Instead, our intelligence acts as a high-powered engine for self-deception. We see this in the brilliant scientists of the past who clung to debunked theories, and we see it today in the highly educated individuals who fall for complex misinformation. They don't believe these things because they are stupid. They believe them because they are smart enough to justify them. The tragedy of Arthur wasn't that he lost his money or his status, but that he lost his ability to be humble in the face of the unknown. To understand why this happens, we have to look at the psychology of the high IQ mind. Smart people possess a trait called cognitive sophistication, which allows them to weave together disparate pieces of information into a cohesive, albeit incorrect, narrative. When a man like Arthur encounters a piece of information that contradicts his worldview, he doesn't just ignore it. He uses his analytical skills to dismantle it. He finds flaws in the methodology, he questions the motives of the source, and he reconciles the contradiction within his own framework. For the average person, a simple fact might be enough to change their mind. But for the expert, facts are just bricks that can be rearranged to build a different house. This is why debates with highly intelligent people often feel like trying to nail shadows to a wall. Every time you think you've cornered them with logic, they use that same logic to escape through a back door you didn't even know existed. The history of psychology shows us that intelligence and wisdom are not the same thing. Intelligence is a tool, a sharp blade that can cut through complexity. Wisdom, however, is the hand that guides the blade. Without wisdom, the blade can just as easily cut the person wielding it. Arthur had the blade, but he had lost his grip on the hand. He had become enamored with the sharpness of his own thoughts. In the United States, the United Kingdom, and Canada, we see this playing out on a massive scale. We have access to more data than any generation in human history, yet we are more divided than ever. This is because we aren't using data to find the truth. We are using it to fortify our existing bunkers of belief. Arthur's story serves as a mirror for all of us who pride ourselves on our rationality. It asks us to consider if we are truly seeking the truth or if we are just seeking the satisfaction of being right. The pattern discovery that Arthur excelled at is the same skill that allows us to build bridges and cure diseases, but when it is untethered from humility, it becomes a path to madness. He spent his final years in that remote research station, still tweaking his formulas, still convinced that the world was wrong and he was right. He had built a prison out of his own brilliance, and because the walls were made of logic, he could never find the way out. When we look back at the hidden history of humanity, we find it littered with the wreckage of great minds who followed a single thread of logic off a cliff. From the alchemists who believed they could turn lead into gold to the brilliant economists who crashed global markets because they trusted their models more than reality, the pattern is consistent. The mind is a master of storytelling. It wants to believe that there is a secret meaning behind the chaos, a hidden hand moving the pieces. For Arthur, that meaning was more valuable than his family or his peace of mind. He was addicted to the feeling of being the only one who knew. If there is a lesson to be taken from the cold November night Arthur spent in that field, it is that the most important part of being smart is knowing when to stop thinking. It is the ability to look at a beautiful, complex theory and say, I might be wrong. This is not a sign of weakness. It is the ultimate expression of intelligence. It is the safeguard that keeps us grounded in the world we actually live in, rather than the one we wish existed. Arthur's equations were perfect, his logic was sound, and his dedication was total. But he forgot that the universe is under no obligation to make sense to us, no matter how many degrees we have on our wall. We must be careful not to judge Arthur too harshly, for his mind is a reflection of our own. We all have our fields, our theories, and our hidden patterns that we cling to when the world feels unpredictable. The danger isn't in having the ideas. The danger is in letting the ideas have us. The higher your IQ, the more creative you are at lying to yourself. The more you know, the more you can manipulate the truth until it fits the shape of your desires. This is the burden of the intellectual, and it is a burden that Arthur carried until the day he died, isolated in his certainty, a king of a kingdom that only existed inside his own head. As we move forward into an age of increasing complexity and information overload, we must remember that the most dangerous thing a smart person can do is believe they are immune to the flaws of the human heart. We are all driven by the same needs for belonging, significance, and security. Arthur found those things in his theories because he couldn't find them in his life. He traded the messy, unpredictable reality of human relationships for the cold, predictable comfort of a cosmic secret. He thought he was ascending to a higher level of understanding, but he was actually just hiding from the vulnerability of being a man who didn't have all the answers. In the end, the story of Arthur is not a story of failure, but a cautionary tale about the limits of human reason. It is a reminder that our minds are powerful, but they are also fragile. They are designed to help us survive, not necessarily to help us see the objective truth. If we want to avoid the intelligence trap, we must cultivate a sense of wonder that is greater than our sense of certainty. We must be willing to stand in the field, see that the stars haven't moved, and have the courage to walk back home and admit that we were lost in the dark. That is the only way to truly find the light. I want to hear from you. Have you ever held a conviction so strongly it cost you a friendship, only to realize later you were looking at the pattern all wrong? Drop a comment below. I read as many as I can. Next week, we're sharing the one thing I wish someone had told me before I trusted my own logic blindly. You'll want to be here for that. If any of this hit home, you know what to do. Thank you for listening. And remember, the battlefield isn't between us, it's inside us. Be careful which side you arm with the most logic. Stay curious, but stay humble.